Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Alberta Prepper. I just wanted to welcome all the new subscribers and thank you for all the likes and stuff. It's very humbling. I know it's not a huge number, but the fact that anyone even wanted to subscribe to my channel was kind of nice to know. Today we're going to start off with an idea that I've had for a while. I wanted to talk about how conspiracies and prepping work together to create something that can either be very good and beneficial or very bad and destructive in a person's life, in a family life, in a community's life, in a nation's life, whatever. But first off, you have to know what is this conspiracy and how does it work and why does it happen? Now, conspiracy is the coming together of two or more people or groups to create something. Now, a conspiracy can be two people in a family getting together to set up a birthday party for a third, a surprise birthday party. But a conspiracy can also be one or two groups getting together to cause chaos in another group's territory. Those are the kind. Conspiracies can be anything. It's not. It's not a silly idea. It's more of what is this conspiracy? Is it a formal conspiracy? Or is it an informal conspiracy? Is it for good? Or is it for bad? Most people think of conspiracies as two or more groups getting together to do something and they plan it and they do it. But most conspiracies aren't that. Most conspiracies are Group A has an idea of what they want to do, Group B has an idea of what they want to do, and Group C is the target of both Group A and B. But Group A doesn't talk to Group B, but they have the same goals to hurt Group C. And people go, well, then that's not a conspiracy. But that's the thing. It is. It's an informal conspiracy because both sides, A and B, already have an idea of what they're going to do. What happens is that Group B will start doing something, and Group A will watch and go, hey, this is our chance to do our thing. And then Group B sees what Group A is doing, and they work together until it's pinpointed and directed straight at Group C. And Group C fights it off and tells Groups D's, E's, and F's, hey, Group A and B are doing a conspiracy against us to hurt us. Well, because Group A isn't really talking to Group B, and Group B isn't really talking to Group A, the other groups go, well, see, you're crazy. That's not happening. They're not talking to each other, so there's no conspiracy. The conspiracy is a loosely connected one, not a formal conspiracy. So, how does that work? Well, let's take for instance, spy organizations. You have, say, spy group A, and spy group B, spy group C, all kind of spying on each other and stuff like that. But again, spy group A and spy group B, spy group C, and notice that they have something that those other two don't have, but they want that. but they don't work together because A and B don't really like each other. They are cordial, but they don't like nor trust each other completely. So they're not going to work together, but they will work in tandem, meaning that one will move forward and the next one will move forward. And they slowly move forward until they're focused on Group C. You go, well, I don't understand that. What do you mean? Well, say that your neighbor has, well, let's say you have a huge stockpile of gold, and the neighbor to the right of you knows that you have a huge stockpile of gold, and they're poor, and they can't, and they need money. They need gold. And the one to your left doesn't need as much gold, but could probably use extra and get some more power, and knows that you have said stack gold. They slowly attack you from different vectors. One comes over and says, hey, how's it going? That's a nice, would you like some barbecue? Yeah, let's have a barbecue. Checks out your thing. The one from the left comes in. Hey, I see that you guys are having a barbecue. Can we join you in the barbecue? At the same time, they're looking for that gold. The one on the left uses the one on the right as the distraction to look for the gold. Then when the one on the left is a distraction to you, the one on the right comes and looks for the gold. Eventually they find the gold. Now they got to figure out how to get the gold out. That's when they work together. They don't trust each other completely, but they trust each other enough to be able to try and get that gold out of you without you knowing. They quietly work together, create that, remove the gold from you. Now you're there without the gold, but the neighbor to the right has a few bars, and the neighbor to the left has a ton. And at no time would you have been able to say, hey, these two are working together, because they never were actually formally working together until the last moment when they were laser focused on what they were going to do, and they knew that each other was going to do something. So they made a deal at the end when the focus was coming in to make that final deal. That's how NATO was formed. That's how the BRICS were formed. That's how wars are fought. Wars aren't fought in ways of overt situations. No one goes out one day and says, hey, I'm going to go fight somebody, because there's a lot of chance of danger for yourself, if you're the attacker, to lose, and lose greatly. So you're not going just to attack just because. But if you feel that you're under threat, you'll attack. So what happens is, one country will be going, hey, I don't like that country. Another country goes, yeah, I don't like that country either. Let's keep an eye on them. So they work together to keep an eye on them. Those two countries may not trust each other, but they are willing to work long enough to subdue their common adversary. Problem is, sometimes that adversary is way stronger than the two combined. So they know that they can't do anything about it unless they find another who's stronger. Or if it's two equals that are going up against each other, they'll find a small one to go in and say, we will back you to fight this other big one. With all the might that we have, we'll back you. But we can't fight for you, but we will back you. So they go in and they do their stuff. And they get into a fight with the bigger one. All this one backs the little one to fight the equal of the other big one. And everyone looks at it and goes, oh, look at that. That terrible big one over here is fighting against this little one. That's terrible. But not looking at who is in the background funding them. The fact is that conspiracies are always real. Sometimes you just don't see the vector that's coming in. You don't see who is connected to who, truthfully. You may see overt connections, but you don't see subvert connections. And those are the connections that can hurt you in the end. And as a prepper, your job is not just to see the overt connections of things, but the subvert connections of things without being paranoid. Like, everyone's coming after me. No. It's, am I seeing the thing that's happening as it is actually happening? Is my government doing this against my territory because it's my government who's doing it? Or is there someone behind my government who's pushing them to do it, who's proxying them to do it? In the next series of videos, I'm going to show you 3 situations of how these vectors will happen. The first one will be cycles. Cycles are ups and downs, but if you actually look at it, it's a circle or an oval. There are small cycles, and then there are bigger cycles, and then there are massive cycles. Once you understand what cycles are, then you can plan for situations. So small cycles will create small issues. Medium-sized cycles will create big issues. Large cycles will create gigantic issues in the future. Your job is to know which cycle it is and how is it going to affect you. Now, the funny part is that each cycle can meet at the top or at the bottom of those cycles at the same time, over a long period of time, that is. So you may be looking at, say, a 7-year cycle, the Shmita cycle. And you go, every 7 years, you'll go up and down and up and down. So there's going to be prosperity and not so much prosperity. Prosperity and not so prosperity. Then there'll be a bigger cycle of 50 years. And at that point, every once in a while, that 50 years will hit the bottom part of the 50-year, will hit the bottom part of the 7-year. So now you have doubled the situation. And then there's a 100-year cycle that will do the same thing. And it will meet up with the 50-year. And sometimes it'll meet up with the 7-year too. At that point, those cycles are all going on at the same time. So you have a bad situation that turns worse, that turns into a disaster. And those are the cycles that you're fighting for. And there are larger cycles than that. There's the 1,000-year cycles, the 2,500-year cycles, the 10,000 to 13,000 year cycles, the 50,000 year cycles, and the 100,000 and the million. Now, once you get into those numbers, it really doesn't matter because it's way past your lifespan. You can prepare your offspring, and they will prepare their offspring for those really big cycles. But at that point, no one's going to remember, because the only reason why you know about those massive cycles is because you're able to look back and see them. But you don't know when that cycle started, truthfully. You don't know when that cycle will end, truthfully. So what you need to be focusing on is your lifespan cycles. So your 7, your 50, and your 100-year cycles. Yes, most of us aren't going to make 100 years, but your children will make that 100-year. I mean, like, they will hit that 100-year too, for sure. Because you're probably born in the middle of each one of these cycles somewhere. Sometimes you may even be born right on the bottom of the cycle or right at the top of the cycle. But either way, you're more than likely going to either hit the middle of that cycle or you're going to hit the end of that cycle in your lifespan. So how do you deal with it? How do you build it? So you're going to ask the question, well, what cycle are we in? We're in 5 different cycles. 3 that we can manage ourselves, and 2 that we have no control over. It was a cycle that a special group of people would understand and would be able to take advantage of and use it to manipulate. The 2 larger cycles are basically societal destruction cycles, not economic. They will affect the economics, but more of the destruction of societies, the destruction of empires. People go, it's 250 years. That's not quite the empire. Those are mini empires. Large empires are cultural empires. It's not the Roman Empire. It's everything that created the Roman Empire and the empires in between. It's the mindset of the people. Were they a democracy? Were they a monarchy? Were they a oligarchy? Were they this or that? These are societal cycles. And we're in the middle of one. Not even in the middle. We're at the last end of it, which is going to be interesting. Now, because these cycles are so big, the lengths of the good times and the lengths of the bad times are much larger and less discerning, meaning that you won't know it actually happened until you're out of it, and it's years, decades later. And most likely, we're not going to be around. So again, not something that we can do anything about, and not something that we should be really worrying about, unless you want to be one of the special groups of people who want to use it for your own means. But to get to that point, you have to be able to use the other cycles first. And at this point, if you're watching this video, you more than likely don't have the ability to manipulate those major cycles. So again, don't worry about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about about cycles, and then we're going to talk about societies, and then we're going to talk a little history and how what happened in the past is is affecting us today. Who created this situation? Why we're in this situation? And what will happen when the final hammer falls on the major cycles? Who will become better off and who will be worse off? What will the population be? What will societies be? Will we be following the rules and regulations that we do today? Are we going to have republics and democracies and stuff like that? Or are we going to have technocracies? Are we going to have oligarchies, like hardcore, where no one owns anything at all except for the special few? Where we go back to a feudalistic society like we had 1,000 years ago, a hardcore one, which we call the Dark Ages. So it wasn't dark, and there were some ages, but that's not, the Enlightenment wasn't the fact that the Dark Ages was dark. The Enlightenment was that we realized that people thrive better when they had a certain amount of freedom, a certain amount of rights, and a certain amount of hope. And feudalism had none of those. And 1,000 years before that, there was another type of societal norm, pretty much planet-wide. And before that, and before that. And then you have major ones that are, like I said, 2,500 years. What was happening 2,500 years ago? What was happening 5,000 years ago? What was happening 10? So we're going to look at a little bit of history. Not in-depth stuff. That's not what this is for. This is to give you an idea of where to look, what to look for, and to see where we are in a cycle, truthfully, and which cycle we're in at the bottom and which cycle we're at the top. And what you do to prepare. Because you have a certain amount of time, a window of time to prepare for the good, and a window of time to prepare for the bad part of the cycle. And how you prepare for either part of that cycle is different. When you're preparing for the good side of the cycle, you're gathering all the stuff that you have to be able to use it to get the things that you need and will protect you in the future. On the other side, when you're preparing for the stuff that's going to be bad, you're getting the stuff that you need, but in a different way. You're getting that stuff that you need to succeed during the rough times. So basically what you're doing is you're building yourself up until you hit that point where it goes up. And then when it crests, you remove any issues that you may have that you were doing while you're getting up there. You clean out your house and you prepare for the downside until it hits that bottom, that very, very bottom, when everything goes to crap. You survive that, and then you build again. And as you do that, you you use the cycle to create, to work for the bigger cycle, and the bigger cycle, and the bigger cycle, and the bigger cycle. But you have to work on the small cycle before you get the bigger cycle. And once you have that, you're ready to go. That's why I say, don't be so quick to jump on a cycle if you don't even know what the cycle is, or how to use it for your advantage. Remember, there are people whose sole goal is to rule everything, and they're on a different cycle. They're on that 2,500, 5,000, 10,000 year cycle, in the hopes that they can control everything, that they are the ultimate gods of this world. Don't let them be that. Learn your cycles and work your way through. Alberta Prepper out.